You know, it's incredible. We spend 3 years making these movies in a building in Burbank, California, and then one day you have to release it to the world and you hope that they're going to like it, but you never really know. So to get that kind of immediate feedback and have this kind of a weekend means so much to us. It's so awesome. I mean, we were so fortunate to get to work again with our great cast, with Johnston, Reilly, and Silverman, who are both here tonight to celebrate with us, as well as new cast members, including Gadot, who will be here soon, who plays the character of Shank. So to really get the whole team back together was one of the highlights of making a second story here with Ralph and Vanellope. You know, it was interesting when the idea first got pitched of what if Ralph and Vanellope went into the internet. It seemed like such an obvious choice and such a great idea. The world's so big and expansive, and we could try and do it in the world of animation. But then you start to realize it's going to be huge, and it needs to be, because that's what the internet is. If we make it really small, it won't feel like the internet that you and I use. So you kind of realize as we're going to make this endeavor that we're going to have to go to extremes we've never been before. And so it is the biggest Disney animated film ever. She's such a great character, Shank is, and Gal brings such an incredible warmth to the character, and it's really critical because she is going to become kind of this big sister character to Vanellope, and there's just something about her delivery that's very emotional. She's probably the most philosophical character in the film, and I think audiences are just going to love her. You know, it's so much fun. When we were going into the world of the internet, we said to ourselves we could kind of go anywhere, so wouldn't it be funny if, you know, Vanellope actually met the Disney princesses. She's technically a princess. That seemed like a great idea for comedy for us. And then as the story evolved, we realized, well, they could actually be a key element for her overall arc, which is that she's ultimately going to fall in love with the world of the internet. So maybe she has a different destiny that she's never thought about. And who better to tell her about that idea of how do you find your destiny than the Disney princesses. So we got to have fun with them, but then we also get to have fun with Marvel characters and Pixar characters and Lucasfilm, Star Wars characters. So it really is this kind of a mashup that we had never anticipated, but now that we've created, we've really enjoyed. Yeah, you know, it's interesting. As we embarked on the story, we said to ourselves, we want to make this be really, really deep and heartfelt. And, you know, if you're going to make a second story with these characters, you got to really move the audience to make it worth us actually telling a second story. And so the key was saying, well, what if these two individuals left the small town of the arcade, they go to the big world of the internet, and one falls in love with it, and the other one just wants to go home? That's going to become a wedge in their friendship. That's what the internet becomes. And ultimately, it's about Ralph having to let go, and these two best friends having to realize they'll still be friends even if they're not living in the same location. So for us, that felt very emotional. It's sort of like parents who have to let their kids go away to university. It's the hardest thing you have to do, but you need to do it to let them grow and become themselves.
But it feels great, and I cannot wait to watch the movie for the first time. The story and the characters, they're really profound and they're universal and everyone can relate to them, and the message of this movie is really strong. I hope they will, but my character is kind of Vanellope's mentor in this movie. Vanellope's going through an evolution, through a lesson, and Shank is there to guide her through, and kind of empowered women empowering women. So that's kind of the dynamic over there. Right! You know, at the end of the day, it's all about people and working with creative, brilliant people whom are also super lovely and nice and professional is a blessing, and I had a lot of fun working on this one. That's the thing, it was the first time I've ever met them. I'm a big fan of both of them, but when I did the recordings, I was alone in the room with Phil and Rich, but finally I got to meet them. You know, again, I think that it's all about stories that we all went through and we can all relate to. And the balance between, even though I haven't watched the movie yet, but I read the script a few times, but I think that the balance between the humor and also having like a great lessons for all of us to learn from, and a good reminders about life and friendship and you know, people and dynamic is just, it's great.
Well, I'm really proud of being part of the Disney legacy, actually, you know, like, that's a really special thing to be able to be in the hearts of kids. And, you know, people forget, adults forget. You know, when an adult sees a movie, it's one of many movies they've seen over the course of their life. But when an 8-year-old kid sees Ralph Breaks the Internet, like, that's a really big moment for them. So I'm really proud to be part of all those big moments for kids all over the world, actually. It was really great. You know, Sarah and I have become friends. You know, this job, working for Disney on these two films, is the longest span of employment I've ever had in my whole life. So getting to work with the same people over the course of 3 or 4 years, and in the case of both films, about 7 or 8 years now, that's really special. And getting to see Sarah, you know, whenever we come in to record, because we record together all the time. Unlike some animated movies, you know, that record the actors separately, we're in the same room. So you end up getting really close to people and catching up with them over long periods of time for the highs and lows of their lives. And it makes tonight kind of special, you know? It's like hard to believe that we're at this moment where the movie's being shared with the world. I got to wear my tweed suit though. You can't wear this in LA, you know, you'll dehydrate in 10 minutes. Yeah, it's always great to come back to London. I made a couple movies here last year, and I in fact recorded some of Ralph Breaks the Internet here, because during the course of, you know, the time we're working, I was away so long that the guys had to come here and record me. So yeah, it's cool to be back in London. It was a little strange to be here for Thanksgiving, but you know, we're doing it for the team. Yeah, it's a really entertaining, exciting movie with a lot of jokes in it and a lot of cultural references and a lot of internet references. But in the beating heart of it is the story of this friendship between this guy and this girl, and they come to a really interesting place by the end of it. They both grow in unexpected ways, and they both still love each other at the end, which is a pretty great ending for a friendship. Yeah, Gal Gadot plays Shank. She's a new kind of role model for Vanellope, Sarah Silverman's character. She's in this really intense racing game, and Sarah's character, Vanellope, is having growing pains from her own kind of more childlike racing game. And we go to this crazy new racing game, and Sarah just falls in love with the place. And Gal Gadot's character is the kind of like the head honcho of that game. Her nickname is Shank. And yeah, and we end up kind of like, Ralph and Shank end up kind of being the two forces that Vanellope is sort of torn between, her old friend and her new friend. And it's one of the cool things that we do in the movie is that we help kids explore this thing that happens with friendships. They grow and they expand and you meet new people, and you have to be able to be a loving friend no matter what you're going through together. So that's a really honest and emotional part of the movie. Well, yeah, there was a lot of room to grow for the film, I think. You know, the arcade was a great little world to set the first movie in, but it was sort of the elephant in the room was, well, everyone plays games on the internet now. Why wouldn't you address that? And of course we get to in this film. A Wi-Fi router gets plugged in, and the little world of Ralph and Vanellope expands like infinitely in one little adventure. Yeah. Yeah, and I recommend people stick around for the entire credit sequence if you can, because there's a great little Easter egg at the very, very end that you'll miss if you leave the theater early.
People love Ralph and Vanellope and John C. Reilly and Sarah Silverman, and we do too. And I think that's a big part of the reason people are loving this film.
Well, it feels very good because we lived with this movie for 3.5 years in a bubble almost, and this is our moment to share it with the world, and we love the film, and it feels very good to see that the world loves it too.
No, there's a very big adventure into the internet, but at the very core of the movie is a friendship between Ralph and Vanellope, which is a great friendship, but they go through some tough times in their friendship, and the movie is really about, can friendship survive a big change and a big conflict? So you got to see it and find out if it can.
Well, we wanted to introduce a new character into this story that's kind of a big sister character, kind of the polar opposite of Ralph, you know, to Vanellope, where Ralph is kind of the big bumbling older brother. Shank is this very cool big sister role, and Gal just adds humor and heart and kind of a coolness that I don't think anyone else could have done, and she was just a pleasure to work with and just a wonderful human being.
It was
hard. It was difficult.
Biggest animated film ever made at Disney. There are scenes where there are literally millions of characters on screen at the same time. So, I mean, really it was simplifying it and coming up with what is the simplest story we can tell within this huge, crazy universe of the internet. And it was that balance that was the biggest challenge, I would say.
Well, Sean's more than just an actor in this film. He's our friend, and He has a tremendous sense of humor. You know, he's one of the great actors in the world today. And that's because he brings like a humanity to every character that he plays. And he does that in great lengths with Ralph in this film. We did pack it pretty full.
All of it.
We packed it really full.
We want them to laugh, we want them to cry, we want them to think. That's what we want them to come away with, all of that.
Because it's about the human condition. I mean, it's about friendship, it's about relationship, it's about feelings that we're not necessarily proud of, you know, not being our best self at times, and working through it. And, you know, where the bad guy is, Ralph's own insecurity is something that is I think that kids can relate to, and certainly adults can relate to.